Hello, today we are going to be doing a science lesson based around second grade standards, focusing on ecosystems. The standard we're focusing on today is developing a simple model that mimics the function of an animal in dispersing seeds or pollinating plants. The learning goal for this activity is for students to be able to see and identify how insects use plants to cross-pollinate and reproduce new plants. When it comes to teaching students, the first thing you would want to do is introduce what pollination is. Pollination is the process that allows plants to reproduce. So, with my model here, the first thing that I would like to introduce are what we see during the springtime, which often leads to pollination in plants. For example, with this bud that I have created, I have 3 different flowers that we're going to show how they pollinate and cross-pollinate and mix up. So, for example, let's say this bug was out in the wild and it saw this flower with a glitter pollen inside. The bug will fly in, mix up, roll into the pollen, and end up taking out what the flower has to produce. Once the insect is done in this flower, it might fly and see another flower. It's already carrying all the pollen that was in the first flower we saw, the glitter, and transfer over. It might see a new flower, this time with sugar in it. The insect will then fly, do the same thing it did in the first one, and roll inside the flower, collecting its pollen. As you can see in this new flower that it has pollinated, you can see the glitter that came from this flower. And as it transfers, it pollinates each flower. And now on the bug, you can see that there's glitter and there's now sugar. But maybe the bug isn't done there. Maybe it sees a different flower. This flower it sees has flour in it. So the bug might fly right into here, get mixed up in it. And then, as you can see, this bug is now covered in flour, and in here, it's hard to distinguish the sugar, but you can see little bits of glitter and some sugar inside this flour now. This is not the only way that this can happen. If there's another bug, for example, it might fly into the sugar first, mix things up. Even though this flower only has sugar in it to start, but since this first insect transferred glitter into it, this insect now has sugar and glitter, even though it only visited one of the flowers. If it then flies to the flower, rolls in the flower, now has all 3 pollens from the 3 different flowers. And then, like the other insect we mentioned, the blue one, you might want to fly into the glitter flower, roll around, mix things up, then is completely covered, and you can see that there is now sugar, flour, and glitter in this one flower. This leads to the reproduction of different flowers, and we see new growth throughout all the flowers in the area. So with that in mind, after I've demonstrated the model, I would like to pose a quick write as a form of an informal assessment. So for this, I would encourage students to get out a science journal or a piece of paper and answer this question. What could you see? What process did you see that encouraged pollination throughout the 3 flowers? It would be at this time that you take a second, pause the video, write down a couple sentences, give me what you understood as to how pollination occurs through the different flowers in nature. Take a second, pause now. And then, underneath your quick write, through the form of the informal assessment, I would like you to ponder this higher order thinking question. This is something that requires something that we didn't necessarily talk about, but it gives a deeper meaning and different reasons as to how pollination occurs. I would like you guys to brainstorm and think of some other ways that you think pollination can occur. We'll give you guys a few minutes, take a moment, pause the video, brainstorm and write it down, and then we'll come back and talk about it. So, the most common way that we see pollination in flowers and plants are through things such as bees, honeybees, bumblebees. They always land in the flower, pollinate it, and then as they transfer from plant to plant, it creates pollination, which allows for the chance for new growth and new life in flowers. But there are other ways that pollination can occur. Sometimes if there is an animal, for example, that eats the fruit of a flower, it might eat the flower, and as it goes through its natural progression, once the animal disposes of those nutrients, the seedlings that are still from the fruit may come out through the form of animal droppings, which will then create new growth and new life. That is one way that pollination can occur other than through insects. Another way is through wind. A very popular way of seeing that is through tumbleweeds. As tumbleweeds blow from the wind, they get jostled and their seedlings drop, which then plant and grow into new life. And that cycle continues and continues and continues. Then another way that pollination can occur is through humans. If humans chop down a tree or plant new flowers, then they grow and new life forms around that. So for this particular lesson, we only focused on the pollination done by insects through the form of flying between flower and flower and flower. However, as we discussed, there are other ways that pollination can occur. I want you guys to, next time you go out in public, if you see a bee flying around, take note of how they transfer from flower to flower. That is pollination at work, and I want you guys to think about that the next time you see bees. Thank you. Have a nice day.